Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming along to our 1 o'clock seminar on rural grants and schemes. My name is Tim Sedgewick. I'll be your chairman for the day. So we're looking at rural grants and schemes in a time which is ever-changing. Society changes and government and funding changes as much as anything else. And farmers are struggling to know where to turn. And landowners are struggling to know what to do as well, and even more so tenants. And we just need to get that clarity from DEFRA. So I was very pleased when DEFRA offered a speaker, with the chap to my left, John Powell, who's the head of agricultural sectors at DEFRA and has come all the way from Essex to be with us today, and has some slides on the agricultural transition period and what that means for farmers in terms of the schemes that will be available. Following John will be Nick Mullins, who's a chartered surveyor at H&H Land Estates in our Carlisle office. Nick is going to give us an agent's perspective to DEFRA in terms of what it is that our clients are telling us, how are they reacting to the schemes, and what it is that they're looking to get from those schemes. So after the two talks, we'll have some questions for the audience, if we could, to try and get interactive and try and get across the feedback that we want to get across to the guys here at DEFRA to be able to take away and ultimately use to deliver schemes that will have a take-up from the community, because if there's no take-up on the majority of the schemes, then they're simply not going to work. So without further ado, I will pass on to, thanks Nick, I will pass on to John Powell from DEFRA.
Thanks very much indeed, and for the welcome and for the invitation to speak this afternoon. Oh, sorry, we need to put the microphone on. Once again, thank you for the invitation to speak. It's really good to be here at the show today. I've had a really enjoyable walk around and met a few interesting people already, so I hope this session will add to the enjoyment of the show for many, and also be an opportunity to communicate some really important information from DEFRA in terms of where farming and support for the farming sector is moving over the coming years. So, as Tim has indicated, the title of the presentation is the Agricultural Transition Period, and the changes that DEFRA will be making to agricultural support in England. And just to emphasise, the measures that I'll talk about this afternoon relate to England, with devolution. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland have full responsibility for their own agricultural policies. So as mentioned, I'm head of agriculture sectors in DEFRA, which includes responsibility for all the livestock sectors. Probably at the outset, there's probably a lot of things that you would like to talk about in relation to the issues that are confronting the agricultural sector at the moment, not least the situation in Ukraine and the impact that's having on both UK and global agriculture. But really, I think it would be a great benefit to spend the time concentrating on the future and the changes that will be introduced, as has been indicated, to agriculture support here in England. In the time available, of course, I'm only going to be able to give a very brief outline of the measures and the new schemes that we're introducing, and to provide information on that. But there are lots of ways that you can get information, not least if you visit the DEFRA and RPA stands. There's a leaflet which summarises all the schemes that I'll introduce this afternoon, and there's also an opportunity to contribute and participate in the co-design of these schemes, some of which are still under development. And there's information in the leaflet, and there's information on one of the slides at the end of the presentation. So I would encourage you as well to not just listen today, but to go away and to contact DEFRA and engage with us on designing some of these schemes. Now I'm going to try and make sure the slides work here. I don't think actually that's the first slide, but never mind. Okay, some of the slides might be slightly different. So basically, to start with, what I'd like to do is introduce the transition to you, some of the changes that we're making to the basic payments scheme, direct payments, talk about the environmentally sustainable farming schemes that we'll be introducing, some of the other investment, productivity and innovation schemes, as well as some of the woodland and forestry schemes, also the changes we're proposing to regulation and enforcement, and finally a bit more about our engagement and communication with the industry. So first of all, just on the agricultural transition, we've obviously left the European Union, and we have an opportunity to develop our own agricultural policy. The new system that we're proposing will support farmers and land managers in 5 key ways, notably to improve the environment, to improve animal health and welfare, to reduce carbon emissions and to store more carbon, to support the resilience of the agriculture and ecosystems to climate change risks, and also to make farming businesses sustainable. We'll be making these changes to policy over a 7-year period, which we're calling the transition period. This will run from 2021, so it's already started, to 2027. And we're giving that period of time to enable farmers and land managers time to adjust and adapt to the new policy framework. So the new agricultural transition will be very much a change in tone and style from previous agricultural policy with the EU. We want to improve and strengthen relationships between government and the farming community, less top-down rule setting, needless bureaucracy and strict enforcement, more collaborative co-design, flexibility in the way schemes work, frequent and useful changes and genuine support to help farmers engage and participate in the schemes. So let me touch first of all upon the 3 environmental land management schemes. We're introducing 3 separate schemes that come under the banner of environmental land management. They've been supported over the last few years by a series of tests and trials that have been testing the different mechanisms by which the schemes will operate, including the payment systems, the enforcement, payment systems, to enable us to get to the point where we now have a national pilot for the first of the schemes, the Sustainable Farming Incentive. So the Sustainable Farming Incentive is the first of our schemes. Pilot agreements have started already, and we will be starting to now to roll out core elements of the Sustainable Farming Incentive, expanding those elements so that we are able to provide a full offer available in 2025. Importantly, we're also continuing to run the Countryside Stewardship Scheme, which will remain open to new and existing scheme agreement holders.
John, sorry to interrupt, I think the SFI slides...
Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting to, thank you, to change the slides. Thank you. This is multitasking at its best here, actually, so do prompt me if I keep forgetting to change the slides. So as I say, the Countryside Stewardship Scheme will remain open to existing applicants and new applicants, and eventually this will merge into the Sustainable Farming Initiative in due course. We also want to ensure that we're giving farmers the opportunity and the flexibility to decide which of the schemes are right for them at this particular time. The second scheme under environmental land management is the local nature recovery. This will be focused on delivering the right things in the right place based on local development plans. Thank you. So yes, local nature recovery. This will start on a phased rollout of the scheme from 2023. And finally, the third scheme is the Landscape Recovery Scheme, which will focus on the delivery of landscape and ecosystem recovery through long-term land use change projects. And the intention is that we will be launching at least 10 projects between 2022 and 2024. The intention is that all 3 schemes will be fully live from 2025. At the same time, we are making changes to phase out direct payments. I think I've gone slightly out of order. Thank you. Changes to the direct payments. This will be through a phased reduction in BPS payments from 2021, with the system also moving to a delinked payment system that will remove any need to actually farm while still being able to receive those payments. The money that we're saving through the reduction in direct payments will be directly reinvested into the new farming and agriculture environment schemes. The phasing out started, as I say, last year, and will be done gradually and fairly. with those in receipt of the bigger amounts of payments facing the biggest reductions, with the last payments being made in 2027 scheme year. At the moment, we've confirmed the scheme reductions for 21 to 24, and we haven't yet set out the reductions for the later years, but the intention is, as I say, that the payments will continue to be phased out until 27. As part of the changes to direct payments, we're also making some significant changes to the way that the payments are made. We've removed the greening rules, we've removed the entitlement usage rules, and we've removed the need for cross-border applications, with farmers now who are based in England applying purely to England and not to other parts of the UK. We've also extended the deadline for farmers to apply in the case of force majeure from 15 days to 8 weeks. We've also introduced, as we phase out the direct payments, delinked payments, which means, as I say, farmers and land managers will not need to farm the land to receive the payments. And once payments have been delinked, recipients will be able to receive direct payments even if they have chosen to leave farming altogether. The delinking payments will start in 2024. Those who continue farming will, of course, still have to continue to comply with the standards on the environment, plant health and animal welfare. We'll also be introducing a lump sum exit scheme. The lump sum exit scheme will enable farmers who are BPS recipients who wish to receive or retire as their money because they want to retire or leave the industry, to do so in a managed way. I can provide more details on this later if anyone wants to ask or has a question. The key thing is that this will also sit alongside a new scheme with extra support to help new entrants into the industry. So just back to the 3 ELM schemes, and I think this was the slide here. The SFF. The intention of this scheme is that farmers and land managers will be rewarded for delivering environmentally sustainable actions and other benefits that society relies upon. The way we pay for these public goods, as they're known, will be different than existing schemes: less prescription, more choice and more flexibility. The length of agreements will be flexible according to the individual circumstances and what farmers and land managers want to deliver through their agreements. In terms of the SFI, I will talk a little bit more about the linkages with the existing countryside stewardship scheme, as I've already alluded to. But the SFI is aimed at farmers paying for actions that relate to farming activities. It will generate significant environmental outputs through, we hope, near universal uptake. We want all farmers to be producing environmentally and climate change benefits as an integral way that they manage their businesses alongside food production. In terms of eligibility for the SFI, when the scheme launches fully in 2022 at the end of the pilot, the environmental standards will be open to farmers who are eligible currently for payments under the BPS, but will in time also be extended to those farmers that aren't currently BPS recipients. Farmers can choose how many of their fields they want to enter into the SFI scheme and apply the various standards. They don't have to enter their whole farms. Farmers in existing agri-environment schemes will continue to be eligible, and you can participate in more than one environmental land management scheme. And as I mentioned, farmers will continue to be able to participate in the countryside stewardship scheme, but won't be paid twice for the same activities. The plan is to open the application window in 22, with first payments being made later this year. In terms of countryside stewardship, I don't know if this is the next one. We've also reviewed the payment rates, and will be increasing payment rates for the majority of revenue options to reflect the changes in agricultural market rates since the payment rates were originally set in 2013. We're also making other improvements to countryside stewardship. We've made it easier to submit applications electronically. We've reduced the evidence needed to support applications. We've changed the approach to inspections. And we've also made it fairer and more proportionate in terms of the penalties that may apply. Now, the second scheme, that's some of the standards. Okay. The second scheme, I've lost the slide completely, but I'm with the three schemes, if anyone can find it. There we are, thank you. The second of the schemes is the nature recovery scheme, local nature recovery scheme. We're positioning this particular scheme as the improved and more ambitious successor to countryside stewardship in England, taking the best of the countryside stewardship scheme and adding some new elements to make the scheme have a wider appeal and to be able to deliver more of the environmental outcomes. The intention is too that it will be less bureaucratic and offer more support to farmers. It will pay for actions to make space for nature in the farm landscape and in the wider countryside alongside food production. Some of the themes that the scheme will deal with include managing feeding, shelter and breeding areas for wildlife on arable farms, managing, restoring and creating grassland habitats, wetland habitats, coastal habitats and lowland heathland, and managing and restoring areas of upland and lowland peat and moorland on farms and in the wider countryside. The local nature recovery is looking to cover a large base, both mass market environmental delivery that goes beyond the SFI, covering some land management actions that are equivalent to the countryside stewardship mid-tier offers, as well as more tailored activities on sensitive sites that are attuned to countryside stewardship higher tier or the higher level stewardship offers. It will also be open to farmers, foresters and other land managers who can deliver the land management activities through the scheme that pays for work on their land. The intention too is this is also intended to encourage cooperation between farmers to work together to maximise the environmental outcomes. In terms of eligibility, it will be open to farmers, foresters and land managers, and the schemes are also not just individual schemes, but it's possible to work across a combination of the schemes, so long as the actions that they commit to in individual schemes are compatible and that, of course, we're not paying for the same actions twice. In terms of collaboration and the way that the schemes will work, the local nature recovery agreements will cover multiple years with the length dependent on the activities being undertaken. They'll be flexible to allow people to add more options on their land and their agreements over time. And we'll continue working with farming experts to make sure the scheme continues to be accessible to tenant farmers and those who farm common land. Overall, we're also going to foster an approach to checking compliance that's more supportive and less punitive for minor discrepancies than certainly was the case in previous schemes, while preventing fraud or other illegal activities and addressing more sustainable failings where necessary. We're going to test a number of approaches that could help make our checks more efficient and risk-based. For example, we'll test how remote monitoring could be used as an alternative to an in-person visit. The third of the three schemes is the landscape recovery scheme. This will be for landowners and managers who want to take a more radical and large-scale approach to producing environmental and climate goals on their land. Thank you, Tim. We're planning to open applications for this scheme in at least 2 waves over the next 2 years. We will launch the application process for the first wave for up to 15 landscape recovery pilot projects later this year. The first wave of projects will be focused on 2 themes: recovering and restoring England's threatened native species, and secondly, restoring England's streams and rivers improving water quality, biodiversity, and adapting to climate change. The selection process for this scheme will be on the basis of us assessing applications against set criteria focused on the project's feasibility, costs, and the potential environmental impact. In each wave, we will award the most promising projects, in the first instance with development funding, which will support more detailed planning over a 2-year period. We will then move the projects to an implementation phase, if they are successful, with projects expected to really be long-term projects, so 20 odd years plus. It will be the time frame we'll be looking at for the delivery of those longer-term environmental goals. So let me then move on to the next set of, sorry, I've gone too far there. Sorry, they're slightly out of order, there we are. Which is the Animal Health and Welfare Pathway. This is another important scheme, particularly for those farmers with livestock. The Animal Health and Welfare Pathway will offer financial support to farmers to take actions that directly improve the health and welfare of their animals. Through the pathway, farmers will be able to apply for funding for an annual health and welfare review. There will be animal health and welfare grants for investments in equipment, technology and infrastructure. There will be a disease eradication and control programme and payment by results for ongoing costs. We plan to launch the first parts of the pathway, the annual review and the animal health and welfare grants later this year. The offer will initially be available to farmers in England who are keepers of cattle, pigs and sheep. The minimum number of cattle will be 10. And those who are currently eligible for the Basic Payments Scheme, the BPS, although it will be possible to assist those not currently participating in BPS at a later stage. I also just want to now briefly touch upon some of the additional new schemes, very briefly, that we're introducing. These will provide grants for productivity, investment and innovation. They include the Farming Investment Fund, which has opened last November, which offers grants to farmers, foresters and growers, helping them to invest in more efficient production that will reduce resource costs, improve yields and give them a fairer and better return. Secondly, the Farming Equipment and Technology Fund provides targeted support to businesses so that they can invest in equipment, technology and infrastructure to improve agricultural, horticultural and forestry productivity in a sustainable way by offering grants towards the purchase costs of specific listed items. We also have the Farming Transformation Fund. This initially launched with a water management theme, which has recently closed, with grants available to improve water use on farms for things like crop irrigation and construction on-farm reservoirs. We also have the Future Farming Resilience Fund, which awards grants to organisations that can support farmers and land managers who are in receipt of the BPS payments. This resilience support should help individual farmers and land managers to learn more about the impact of reductions to direct payments on their businesses, how their business models might need to adapt in the light of the new environment, business planning, performance recording and succession planning. And this support will be offered free of charge to farmers and land managers by the organisations that have been selected, who we believe will be known and trusted within the farming community. We also have introduced a farming innovation programme which will support ambitious R&D projects to transform productivity and enhance environmental sustainability in England's agriculture and horticultural sectors, while driving the sectors towards net zero. There are 3 funds that will be part of this particular programme: an industry-led R&D partnerships fund, Farming Futures R&D fund, and projects to accelerate adoption of the fund, which will be open for applications later in 22. We also have a programme that will be is now open for applications for farming in protected landscapes. This will be open to all farmers and land managers within an area of outstanding natural beauty or natural parks or in the Norfolk Broads. This will be funding for one-off projects that will support farmers to carry out projects that support nature recovery, mitigate the impacts of climate change, provide opportunities for people to discover, enjoy and understand the landscape and cultural heritage, and to support nature-friendly, sustainable farm businesses. Finally, there are two other schemes which relate to forestry and woodlands support, the Tree Health Scheme and the Woodland Creation Scheme. The last thing I just want to come on to is just changes to regulation and enforcement. One of the key changes that I alluded to at the start that we're planning to introduce is to reduce the regulation and enforcement mechanisms that currently apply, making them much more simpler, much more fairer, and with less punitive penalties. We also want to have a clearer distinction and coherent relationship between the basic requirements that farmers and land managers are obliged to meet by law and the scheme standards where they are paid to go beyond that regulatory baseline. So we're looking, as I say, to simplify the regulation, to remove duplication and overly burdensome requirements and procedures for those, the enforcement to be proportionate to the work that's been done and the money that's been paid, to support and enable farmers with clear user-friendly guidance, and to prioritise addressing areas of the highest risk based on using evidence to explain why the compliance is necessary. We are currently working on co-designing this new system with farmers and ensuring that the system we introduce has their support and their buy-in. So finally, how can farmers get involved? As I mentioned on the back of the leaflet, there are lots of ways to participate. There's an opportunity to co-design and be involved in the co-design of the schemes. There's blogs that you can look into. You can sign up for DEFRA e-alerts, and there's also a website that you can go to that enables you to register if you want to participate in any way. That's a real fast run through the schemes, and I'm happy to take any questions that people have on any of that. And as I say, the best thing to do is engage with DEFRA to participate in the co-design process, and I look forward to a number of you being able to do that as a result of today. Thanks, Tim. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, John. Without further ado, I'm just going to pass on to Nick Mullins, and we'll have questions after Nick's slide. So, Nick, this is an agent's perspective. Over to you.
Great. Well, we're going to continue rattling through various things. As Tim says, giving our sort of viewpoint of what we're hearing from our clients, some of the concerns we have about what's coming up. So firstly, BPS. We've had lots on this already. Specific things to mention for this year is that if you've acquired land after the 17th of May last year and you're wanting to get entitlements on the National Reserve as a young farmer or a new entrant, that is no longer possible. That's new legislation that came out earlier this week. Slightly beyond me why DEFRA and the government have decided this, given that they say they're wanting to support young farmers, but you can ask your questions to John on that later. The lump sum exit scheme I'll come on to in a minute. And the other thing to say about reductions is that you'll have experienced that with your first payment last year, and by 2024, as John said, you'll have at least a 50% cut in what you had in 2020, if not more, if you're a larger farm. Delinking from 2024, you won't need the land, and entitlements we expect will just disappear, a bit like milk quotas did back in the day. For Scotland, we're not expecting any significant changes. They are slow in releasing their guidance, but as far as I can see, certainly this year is remaining the same as previous years. So the lump sum exit scheme, that's coming out this year. This is the idea that you can retire from farming and get all your payment for BPS that you would be getting up until 2027 in one lump sum. There are a few details that are missing from this that we're still awaiting to hear from the government. The legislation is yet to be finalised. You can apply from late April, and the applications close at the end of September. It is still worth doing your BPS claim for this year if you're considering this, because your application may not be deemed successful and you don't want to miss out there. If you apply for this, you must dispose of your land by 2024, 31st of May 2024, some exceptions such as if the land is in probate or you're at tribunal. But for most people, you'll have to got rid of it by then. And that means selling the farm. You can retain 5 hectares and the buildings and the house, but as I'll come on to in a minute, there's some serious concerns about that from a tax point of view. You can also let the farm out for 5 years or more and then go back and farm it if you want to. You must have claimed BPS in 2018 to be able to get this lump sum scheme. And then there are reference years for how they're calculating this payment, which is 2019, 2020 and 2021. So considering some of the reductions from last year as well. This equates to, with the phased out, approximately 2.35% of last year's payment. 2.35 times last year's payment. And there are caps on the maximum amount they'll pay. Partnerships are much more complex. It depends who owns the entitlements within the partnership and what percentage share the partners have who are trying to come out. And as I say, we have some concerns and issues. With IHT, if you decided to do this but retain your farmhouse and the buildings, inheritance tax, that's our land agency shorthand. Inheritance tax, if you're you're thinking, this is a great idea, I'll sell all my land, but I'll stay in the farmhouse, keep the buildings, keep 5 hectares. The risk is you will lose your agricultural property relief that you get at the moment. So it's worth thinking carefully about that. It's probably better to rent out the whole farm on a 5 or 10 year FPT, move out, and then move back in, because you'll still keep, if you've had the farm for more than 7 years, you'll still keep the agricultural property relief on the farm. And after long discussions between various non-government bodies lobbying government, HMRC have agreed that this lump sum payment will be considered as capital and not income. That's a whistle-stop tour. Do ask questions on that one. We've had the grants spoken about briefly. Just to say that the deadline for mid-tiers is the 31st of July this year. Capital grants now have a rolling window, but now that we've left the European Union, there's a limited pot of money. We're expecting it to run out. There seems to be a high uptake. There are some significant changes to catchment-sensitive farming. So if you've in the past had grants, you've roofed over sheds, you've concreted, that require that endorsement, there are some substantial changes to how you go about it, and there is no guarantee you'll get anything. Just to pull up one of the other grants that John talked about, the Farming Investment Fund has a transformation and improvement part to it. This is potentially very of good interest to dairy farmers, looking at robotic and autonomous equipment, so robotic milkers, complex ventilation control units for your livestock sheds. There's a minimum grant amount of 35,000, maximum $500,000, and it's a 40% grant. So it's a substantial outlay, but the whole idea is trying to help improve the farm business for the future. The one thing to say on that, you have until this Wednesday to use the eligibility checker. So if you're at all interested, it's worth coming to speak to us or having a look yourselves at doing that, because that at least gets your interest registered. You can always pull out later on, but that is a fixed deadline from the government. We've heard about the schemes going forward, much of the concern over what is being paid. to farmers for trying to do significant environmental benefits. The length of a scheme year being 20 years will also make people think, well, that's the next generation. How can I decide how they're going to farm the land? So further questions there. And it's great that there's changes to the way inspections being done, but after decades of DEFRA taking one tack and being quite onerous on farmers, I think it's going to take some while before they build back the confidence that they've lost. As I said, catchment-sensitive farming, currently high priority areas. I realise we'll have people from all over England here, but this is sort of our geographical spreads. But do talk to us if you're elsewhere and want some help. Currently, it's just the red areas. From the beginning of April, you'll be able to get your water capital items. So that's the roofing and concreting I was talking about, and yard drainage. All the guidance, all of these details, we actually put into a webinar as a company about a month ago, which is available on our website. So if some of this stuff you're missing and not quite understanding, do check out the webinar. And also there's a podcast regarding the robotic milkers, 15 minutes of your time to get an understanding of what that's about. You have to engage CSF early. They've changed their tack. They're advising, then endorsing. So you can't just fill out a form. You won't get any endorsement. You have to contact them first and request advice and discuss that with them. And there's no endorsement guaranteed. We have also been told that they have a list of priority farms, the catchment sensitive farming team, but they won't tell anyone what that is. So basically they're in for wasting your time, is my view. Because it's much easier to say what the priority farms are, because if our clients are those farmers, we could approach them and work together, co-design, collaborative, but again, that's a decision outside my control. Slurry. Every dairy farmer has slurry. If you don't, I'd like to meet you. Soon you won't be able to do what that picture's doing, and we're expecting the legislation to change with slurry to require a storage capacity of at least 6 months covered storage. There's a possibility, there's talk that grants may come towards the end of the year. We often get talk of grants or funding or whatever, and then DEFRA and government change their minds. So you can ask questions, John, on that later if you want to. But the whole idea is that part of our obligations as a country to achieve net zero, and part of our the Environment Act that came out, that was received royal assent last year, slurry is one of the things that needs to be looked at. So you want to think about how you're storing your slurry, how you're, and then there will be things in due course about how you can actually spread it. Again, trying to reduce the environmental impact that is perceived of the gas emissions. Obviously, slurry is a high quality resource that benefits the farm hugely. Okay, future opportunities and challenges. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. It's clear from what John has said, some of what I've said, that change is coming. We're already seeing it. That's to BPS, this agricultural transition plan that's DEFRA rolling out. So my advice is don't bury your head in the sand, as tempting as that may be, especially when you face the difficulties of working with external bodies from the farm and government organisations. Think about the business. Where are you wanting to take the business for the future? You know, thinking about, are you wanting to expand on cattle numbers, or are you wanting to decrease? And thinking about the infrastructure required. I'm conscious that this is very difficult when we're told that we're getting grants later this year or next year, and we still don't have any of the fine detail. How any business can plan for the future when we don't have that detail is slightly beyond me. Again, DEFRA might be able to shed light on that. And it's also hard, so we get the detail at the 11th hour, but then we don't get the agreements until the 13th hour. So countryside stewardship applications that went in last year started on the 1st of January this year. You may well be one of these people who still yet to receive your agreement, yet you are bound by the terms of the agreement. When you get offered it, it's backdated to the 1st of January. And yet there are some time restrictions on when you sow your crops, if you're doing combinable whole crop, or when you can plant your hedge, because there's a planting window. And there seems to be no allowance from government in changing this. Resilience, thinking, I put that there just to think, actually, how do we make the farm resilient for the future? What can we do, what can you do to your business to help ensure that it sort of withstands some of these variations that we're seeing? Costs. We've all experienced costs going up, and we've experienced it for the last 6 months. I think government will try and play the rhetoric that the Russian war on Ukraine is to blame for all of this, but we saw fertilizer prices shoot up last year before we had the war in the Ukraine, and we've seen food costs go up, feed costs go up. The cost of living, if you're not a farmer, for everyone, is going up, and government seem to not be doing anything about it at this stage. And obviously, I mentioned the Russian war on the Ukraine. That does mean costs will probably go up more, because now that has made the situation worse, it's exacerbated it. But it was an issue already. And linked with that is food security. War in any part of the world reminds us that things can get difficult very quickly. And actually, as British farmers, we are able to produce wonderful food, wonderful commodities that British people need. One of the big concerns, obviously, in Ukraine, one of the largest exporters in the world of wheat and of seed for oil, is obviously if they can't establish their crops this year because of the war, then we're going to see an increase in demand from a smaller supply. Most of Ukrainian wheat is exported to Asia, so we're not directly affected, but obviously where there's a gap in the market, there's an increased demand elsewhere. A bit like if you've got 3 supermarkets and 2 of them close, you may not have been shopping there before, but you're going to the one that remains. And so cost will increase. And I would really urge you to write to your local MP, and not necessarily a long letter, but explain the impact that these increased costs are having on you and to your business, and to reiterate to them the need for food security and the benefits and brilliance of British agriculture. So write to them, and write to government ministers as well. Write to George Eustace and his other ministers. Write to the Prime Minister. Get the voice heard. There are wonderful, NFU are doing great work on this and others as well. But each farmer, I was speaking to an MP the other day about totally different, and they based the number of, the level of importance of an issue based on the number of letters that they have or the number of constituents who communicate the issue. So the more who communicate to the MP, the more that the importance is realised by those in Whitehall who often have never actually stepped foot on a farm, even those, some of those within DEFRA as well. Moving on to the next point, remember that future grants are not subsidy. They're all about delivering environmental objectives. They're not paying you for your food. That's another discussion for another time, but it's all about environmental delivery. And carbon, as my final point, there is a requirement, as I've said, to achieve net zero from this government, and farms will soon be will be in the limelight for that. I would advise you, particularly if you're a dairy farmer, not to be selling your carbon credits off farm. Farms will soon need to prove that they are offsetting their carbon impact, and so any trees you have on your farm, any hedgerows, the quality of your soil and the organic matter in that is all an asset to you and your business. At the moment it has no financial value, which is another discussion, and maybe that's where some of these other schemes are developed in more detail, they'll pay for that, but at the moment there isn't, it's worth holding on to your carbon. The market is still very young and new for carbon credits. It's better to hold tight and hold on to your carbon before you get rid of it, and then you're in a difficult position where you're probably having to buy carbon credits if you've sold them already. As I say, complete whistle-stop tour. I've not touched everything, not gone into detail on everything, but I hope that gives a viewpoint of what we think as agents are some of the issues coming up, and also highlight some of the concerns we have. And hopefully John and the team can take some of these back to their colleagues and get things involved. Do get involved, co-design. I know DEFRA want to work with farmers. Invite them to your farm. They might not have been to a farm before, and they can see what you're doing. Do get involved, and if you want any help, either with getting involved with DEFRA or in any of the other matters discussed, do please get in touch.
Thank you very much, Nick. Some very passionate points there, put across very well, so I'd like to thank you for that. We'll open the floor for questions, but first of all, John, one theme which came out of there was the fact of DEFRA doing the lump sum exit support scheme for retiring farmers and those looking to exit industry. And Nick picked up on the fact of that entitlements won't be available from the National Reserve, which is basically applying for entitlements free of charge as opposed to buying them if young farmers have taken on more land, for instance. And they're no longer going to be available, so you're limiting the support provided to young farmers, albeit the BPS is a diminishing scheme, but there's still a lot of value to be gained from it. What's the rationale behind that, is the first question. And I guess the second one is, what are the plans to support younger farmers looking to progress and step up the ladder?
Okay, there are plenty of other questions I'm sure you're going to raise as well. On the lump sum, I have to be perfectly honest, I wasn't involved in the decision that was made last year. I suspect it was because we needed to fix the payments for the 7-year period to individual farmers to make sure that the calculation of the reductions was accurate and correct. I think the important issue is the second part of your question, which is what we'll do for young farmers. At the moment, we haven't announced what the plans will be to support young farmers, but the intention is for there to be a scheme to help young farmers into farming, and in due course we will elaborate how that will operate, how people can apply, and what the scheme will offer. But unfortunately at the moment that's one of the schemes that's still to be elaborated.
Nick, did you have any questions for John, or indeed any further points for DEFRA, how you're seeing things?
Yeah, just one question, reflecting the rising costs that everyone's experienced. It's great that DEFRA have reviewed the revenue payments for countryside stewardship. The costs for fencing materials, for building materials, for the capital items have shot up. There was talk that this was being reviewed. Government have made it clear now that it's not, and they're leaving them as they are. Can you hopefully provide a different dialogue to that, or go back and actually get that review? Because at the moment it's going to make many schemes undeliverable.
Okay, I'm not going to make a commitment to go away and change the decision that's been made, but clearly once the schemes are up and running, we've said that we're going to learn from experience. We're going to look at the uptake, we're going to look at whether there are problems, challenges in delivering the environmental outcomes, and we will continue to review and update the standards accordingly. So I think there's a national pilot underway for the SFI at the moment. We're learning lessons from that. An important part is this co-design concept. So real farmers are doing the real work on the ground at the moment. We're learning lessons from them, we're getting feedback. And as I said, we're going to continue to develop and evolve the way that the schemes work over time. The offer that exists now, I'm sure, will not be the case, the similar schemes in 2030 and onwards, because we will continue to be adaptable to reflect changes and put those back into the scheme. So, yes, no change at the moment, but let's see as the scheme continues to evolve and develop whether it's appropriate to make those changes or not, I don't know, but we will be looking at those sorts of issues.
Okay. I think the one thing I'd just add to that is it is worth recognising that there will be some in existing schemes who will not be able to deliver the obligations due to rising costs. And DEFRA need to be aware of that if they don't make any changes.
Well, in those particular cases, I would encourage them to talk to National England and DEFRA where there are problems, and at least ensure DEFRA are aware of those specific circumstances. There was a point you made just about slurry, sorry, as well. What we're doing with slurry is that there won't be a standalone scheme now. We will be integrating that within the Farming Investment Fund.
Okay.
And grants are anticipated to start from November this year. So it's going to be an integral part now of the Farming Investment Fund.
Thank you for that clarity.
Just a quick show of hands now, really, from amongst the audience. Does anyone know, or has anyone in themselves or does know anyone who is participating in the Sustainable Farming Incentive Pilot? No show of hands.
Oh, I do.
You do. Oh, I do. Yeah.
Doesn't
The Sustainable Farming Incentive is due to open, limited opening this year in 2022 for all BPS claimants. Show of hands for anyone who knows when the application window will be.
Do DEFRA know when it will be?
That's the question. When can we expect that application window?
Later this year.
Yeah. So I think some clarity on that would be good. And maybe at this point, if I could open the floor to some questions. Is that who wants to go first at the top? Murdo, do you want to go? Yeah.
And then Tim's actually mentioned young farmers and new entrants in the industry who have that detail on the retirement scheme. We really need the new entrant scheme live now to work with that scheme.
Yeah, so the points on there, just so anyone who didn't hear Murdo, is a food security. When we look at the leaflet, there's no mention of food production in the leaflet. How much is it actually being thought about in DEFRA? And the second point was really a plea for some detail around the new entrant and the young farmers scheme. So, John, do you want to address the first bit about the lack of food production being mentioned and being brought into?
Sure. I'll actually answer the second one first, because we are very much is the intention of the government to ensure there is a new entrant scheme. So, yes, I accept everything that's been said. There are lots of information on some schemes still outstanding. Accept that will be coming out in due course, and the offer will be available to make it clear what the scheme will provide for. On food security, the first thing is that this leaflet is not a summary of government policy. I mean, it doesn't talk about our animal disease control, it doesn't talk about lots of other subjects. This is purely to do with our future farming offer, the agricultural transition plan. On food security, the government has committed under the Agricultural Act to produce a report every 3 years on food security. The first was produced just before Christmas. We're about 60% self-sufficient in food production in this country. We're always going to depend on imports because the consumer demand is such that there are certain things that the consumer wants to eat that we don't produce here. But as I say, the government is committed to producing this report and to reviewing what that report finds every 3 years. So at the moment, the government sees there's a balance between ensuring that British food is, as it is of high animal welfare standards, its good quality is grown to good environmental standards, and that there will still be a balance of imports to supplement that. So very much aware that food security is an issue, and as you say, at the moment the Ukraine situation has highlighted that even more so, which is why we're trying to ensure that we support our agriculture sector for the longer term to be productive, efficient and sustainable.
Was there another question there?
I'm talking not as a farmer, but as a taxpayer. I just want to ask Ken just a couple of quick questions. Because there were about 13 things that came know from experience, my kid is too late. It just takes too long, it becomes disjointed, and then other things become a focus, whatever the flavour of the day is. And that concerns me, that we might lose people from the farm industry because it will take too long to make decisions.
I would say we are trying to improve our dialogue with DEFRA and the RPA. It seems to be there's lots of people who say they want to talk and then it's difficult to get hold of them. But that is something we're wanting to do more and more off the back of what you've highlighted. We represent lots of clients across the north of England, and that's where I'd say if you are a farmer, share your voice with us, and that gives us, because we only know as much as our clients tell us and our observations on the ground. So the more that we know, the more that we can put towards DEFRA and say this isn't one unique voice, but this is 5,000 voices represented by one body. But that's a very helpful point, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point, actually. I think it's something which we all could learn to do more of. You know, definitely, John, you're here today, your team are here, you attend many shows, but, you know, how often are we actually just going to one side and sitting down and you know, Nick's very conveys himself in a way which, you know, identifies the problem and pretty much straight to the point, really, as well. And that's probably a lot of things we could all learn on. You know, as much as you guys are here today and it's, you know, you're taking the questions on board, sometimes it doesn't filter through to the people who actually deal with it. You know, so you'll ring the RPA up and the person answering the phone doesn't necessarily understand how things are meant to work. You know, you guys are here, you're at the coal face as such, but then the people actually delivering the schemes, how much is that connection between, you know, the ones at the top, the managers, so to speak, yourselves, who are going out, setting the policy, learning from likes of these days, how much is that actually filtering down to those who are doing the actual work?
I mean, it's a really good question, absolutely. And I would say, from a DEFRA perspective, there are lots of things that we are doing to engage. I mean, I've got stakeholder team colleagues here who will tell you that we have various stakeholder engagement groups at a higher level. I'm also responsible for the agriculture sector, so in my teams meet regularly with all of the agriculture sector representatives, so the National Pig Association, the National Beef Association, the National Sheep Association on a regular basis. At a detailed level, we come out to shows. I'm here today, you know, take questions, and happy to at any time to take questions, or to me if you have issues to discuss. You can ring, you can email, and we'll do our best to have that engagement. So from our side, we really do want to engage with as many stakeholders as possible to get that. You know, the whole principle of co-design is that we stop this sitting in government or in Europe and imposing policy, but actually it's developed in partnership. So very much happy to hear people's views and to understand more and to listen, and to do our best to shape policy that reflects that.
I think even if you get to 50, 70%, 75% would be good news.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And John, we've heard it already, I mentioned it earlier. It's all I totally get co-design, and I think it's a very good thing to be doing, and a much needed change from government and DEFRA. It is still very hard to plan for the future when we're given the details of a scheme that then immediately goes live. People need time to plan, to have that discussion with the next generation about the lump sum, to have that discussion about the farming business going forward, who's coming into the partnership, who's going out. Discussions, you know, landscape recovery, I deal with a number of upland clients and commons clients, and the discussions we have there are usually sort of 18 months in the making. And so we can't just turn around and decide within 4 months what we're doing. And so I don't know whether we can get at least some substance. Today's the first time I've heard that there is a support scheme for new entrants coming out. Maybe I've missed all the bulletins or something, but it'd be good to try and get as much detail out early on, even if it's provisional. I know there's revisions, but just to give people an idea that this is coming, they can plan, they can prepare. Those are my thoughts.
And not on the Elm schemes, I mean, primarily the first scheme, the SFI, is going to be one that we anticipate the majority of farmers entering. Much simple, flexible, farm-based activities that will enable, the existing benefits that many farms have already in terms of environmental outcomes can be addressed through that scheme. The nature recovery is more of a cooperative approach between farmers. The landscape scheme is much bigger, so really is going to be 20-year sorts of projects. Peat, recovery, forestry, woodlands, etc. That's going to be the very, very big partners. Yes, individual farmers may participate in that, but I think part of what I said today, there'll be phases to that. So there will be an initial development phase to give 2 years to work an idea up into a proper plan before it's implemented. So really, it's the SFI at the present time is what really farmers should be looking to. And probably in many cases delivering many of the environmental outcomes that they currently have on farm that they don't get rewarded for. And as you mentioned here, don't sell your carbon assets because that may well be something that there's a revenue generation opportunity from that in due course. But the SFI is being piloted at the moment. We're picking up some of these lessons. We've announced what the standards will be, and the scheme will open later. Yes, it does appear a little bit rushed, but it's the nature of change. Sometimes we'd all like more time to develop, but we are going through a transition. As I said, things will develop and enhance and move on over time. And as long as we have that discussion, participation, we'll be able to take those steps together.
And Nick, now, I think we've got time for one more question or point or observation from the audience, if we have, or are we looking to round it up?
I've got one.
Yeah.
I'm very much into the loans scheme. I'm 34, that's 60. I run that to work on costs and farms and goes off it. Now, we looked at it earlier last year, and it looked like we could get £60 from it. We were sent to the farm, we went to we re-looked at it earlier this year, and that was drastically diminishing the amount of kids out of it. So it was viable. Now, there are a number of people in my situation who would keep wants to get to farm. We can't get it. What the hell are you going to do? You've got average forest now. Farms in bigger, got staff, their calls and dispersal sales, H&H is fully purchased as a shield. Your food is severe. But young key guys, possibly lads of my age, who want to get in and drive and live in agriculture. You don't really money there to try and local lifestyle. How are we supposed to get into it, provide for our families, and deliver food to cherished people? It's just not there. The schemes aren't there. The one-bedroom schemes are shocking. People are renting. Suppose your big guys who have 1,000 acres of hills and mates, passing into their sons and daughters going to 85s. Whereas those rural farmers don't stand a chance. We really have to look after them again and encourage us to come into the industry and deliver what we want to do.
Some very good points there, well put forward, which I think, there's plenty from DEFRA here, you need to hear that loud and clear from the gentleman and the situation he's facing, and he won't be the only one. There'll be many like him of various sizes and stages, and we're really advising that that's taken away and that we see something delivered for that. John, do you have anything to?
I said thank you for the comments you made, and I'm sorry to hear that there's some challenges to you. We'll take that away. I just encourage you still to continue to have the discussions and to try and resolve some of the challenges you faced. We'll do our best to help. But clearly we need to know where the problems are, so we will feed that back.
Yeah, and that is one person. It could be 5,000 people with that same view. Just when you meet one person with an issue, I think I'd say to DEFRA, assume there's at least 100, if not 1,000, with exactly the same view. Each person's situation is unique, but many of the voices and situations and opinions are very similar. Yeah, the themes that they talk about, such as this one.
Okay, unless anyone has any burning desire for question or observation, I think we will round it up there. So thank you very much for attending our Rural Grants and Schemes seminar. John, I'd like to thank you and your team for coming up. Obviously, you can't be responsible for all the problems. You know, it's not all on your shoulders, but we would like to think that your team will come away from Dairy Expo today with the points made, you know, either side of the room, which have a succession type of slant to them, which is a theme we see more and more, and for also to have greater collaboration with the likes of ourselves and other agents. We hope you'll take that away today, and we hope to see how that develops. Nick, you gave very impassioned points and are very keen in getting your thoughts across, so I'd like to thank you very much for that. And I'd like to thank you all for participating and attending today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.